This lesson is an introduction to the article system in English. This is one of the most difficult aspects of English grammar for language learners, particularly those whose native language does not use articles. The articles in English are a, an, the indefinite articles, and the definite article. There is also the so-called zero article, in other words, the absence or non-use of a, an, or the in front of a noun. The articles are a subset of the part of speech called determiners. You can see the other determiners on this slide. Determiners precede nouns, and each determiner type has its own grammar. When using many of the determiners, the learner has choices to make, depending mainly on the grammatical number of the noun that follows them. For example, the choice between much and many in sentences such as I don't have much time, I don't have many friends, or this apple is bad, these apples are bad. The choice of the correct article, on the other hand, is much more difficult, as we shall see in the rest of this lesson. The most important starting point in deciding which article, if any, to use is to determine whether the article is to be placed in front of a noun that is grammatically countable or uncountable. For example, we can count apples and make the noun plural, 1 apple, 2 apples, 20 apples, etc. But we cannot count furniture. In other words, furniture doesn't have a plural. 1 furniture, 2 furnitures, 20 furnitures are all ungrammatical. Here are lists of common countable and uncountable nouns. In each case, we can put the number 1 in front of the countable nouns. For example, I had 1 chair as a student. But we cannot put the number 1 in front of the uncountable nouns. For example, I had 1 luck yesterday is ungrammatical. The noun chair is always countable, and the noun luck is always uncountable. But some nouns can be countable in one context and uncountable in another context. One example is the noun hair. In the context where hair refers to all the hair on the head, then the word is uncountable. So, she has nice hairs is ungrammatical. But in the context where hair refers to one or more single strands of hair, then the word hair is grammatically and in reality countable. For example, there are 2 hairs in my soup. Here are more nouns that are countable or uncountable depending on the context. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. Okay, you now know about the 2 different types of noun. You are ready to learn which of the articles must be used with each type of noun in a particular context. We will start with countable nouns and state Rule 1. A singular countable noun must be preceded by an article, either the definite article or the indefinite article. This also applies when the noun is preceded by an adjective. So all of the sentences on the right are ungrammatical. The next question that arises is, which article should we use in front of a singular countable noun? The definite article or the indefinite article? This leads us to Rule 2, which states, on the first mention of a singular countable noun, use the indefinite article a or an. Here are several sentences in which the blue noun is mentioned for the first time in the text or conversation. Now we are ready for Rule 3. On the first mention of a plural countable noun, for example when generalizing, do not use any article, that is the zero article. For example, do you like dogs? Children are often very loud. Tigers can swim. It is common to mention the same noun later in the text or conversation. We can call this the second or subsequent mention. This leads to Rule 4, which states, On the subsequent mention of both singular and plural countable nouns, use the definite article. On this slide is a short text that exemplifies this rule. Note that the rule does not apply to plural nouns in generalizations. Now let's turn to uncountable nouns. These are a bit simpler since, by definition, uncountable nouns have no plurals. So Rule 5 is, on the first mention and on the subsequent mention of an uncountable noun, do not use an article. Remember, some grammarians refer to this non-use as the zero article. Here is an example conversation. Do you like cheese? No, I never eat cheese, but I do drink milk. Yes, milk is good for you. Here are some more examples of the zero article in front of uncountable nouns. The uncountable nouns here are broadly categorized as substance nouns, mass nouns, and abstract nouns. There is an important exception to the first mention principle in Rules 1 and 5 above. As a reminder, Rule 1 states, on the first mention of a singular countable noun, use the indefinite article. And Rule 5 states, on the first mention and the subsequent mention of an uncountable noun, do not use an article. The exception to both rules is this. When the first mention is the mention of a specific or definite noun, the definite article must be used. Here are several examples of the definite article being used on the first mention. As you can see, many of the countable and uncountable nouns in these sentences are post-modified. For example, by a defining relative clause or by a prepositional phrase. These post-modifications specify or define who or what we are referring to. The definite article is also used on the first mention of a noun in other contexts. Firstly, when it is obvious what is being referred to. Or secondly, when what is being referred to is unique in the context. That is, when there is only one of them. Here are examples of both countable and uncountable nouns that are obvious or unique in their context. So now we're ready to state Rule 6. Always use the definite article when specifying what is being referred to or when what is being referred to is obvious or unique. An alternative, more detailed version of the rule is always use the definite article even on the first mention when specifying the noun, for example by a post-modifying relative clause or prepositional phrase, or when the noun is obvious in the context, or when the noun is unique in the context. We can summarize the rules in a different and simpler way in a flowchart, starting with the question, can I assume that my listener or reader will know what I mean? If yes, because it is the subsequent mention or what is being referred to is unique, obvious, or has been specified, then use the definite article the. If no, I cannot assume that my listener or reader will know who or what I am referring to, then if 1, the noun is a singular countable noun, use the indefinite article a or an. Else if 2, the noun is an uncountable noun or a plural countable noun, then use no article, zero article. Okay, let's apply the flowchart procedure from the previous slides to decide which article, if any, is needed in each of the spaces indicated by the numbers in this text. Here is the analysis. First, the question. Can my husband assume whom or what I mean when I mention each of the nouns in my account of the incident? Now the answer. The first time I mention the nouns girl, dog, man and tree, my husband does not know which girl, dog, man and tree I am referring to. So since these nouns are singular, then the indefinite article a is used. But he does know which park I mean, since it is the park near our house that I always run through. And yes, he does know when I mention the girl and the dog for the second time, since he now knows that I'm referring to the girl and the dog I saw when running through the park. So in these contexts, the definite article the is used. Here is the completed text with a summary of the reasons for the choice of article in each case. Rule 1 states that a singular countable noun must be preceded by an article. So sentences such as train is late or hospital is opposite church are ungrammatical. But as is most often the case with grammatical rules, there are exceptions. An important exception to Rule 1 is the zero article in sentences such as I go to work by train and do you go to church. Here are more examples of this idiomatic use of the zero article in front of a singular countable noun. This zero article usage can be explained by the fact that, in many cases, it is not a singular thing that is being referred to. Instead, the reference is to a more generalized understanding of what the noun entails. So, go to bed means something like, it's time to sleep. And in does your little sister go to school? The questioner is not thinking of the building, but is asking a more general question about whether the little sister has yet started formal education. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. The site associated with this video series has an article picker app that can help you choose the correct article in a given context. At the same time, using the app can help you understand and learn the basic rules we have covered in this lesson. There is a link to the app in the Show More description below this video. This is a screenshot of the interactive part of the Article Picker app. The first essential question is the noun countable or uncountable? If you don't know the grammatical countability of the noun in the context in which you want to use it, then click I don't know. This will open a feedback box that has a link to an excellent online dictionary that tells you the countability of every English noun. If you click the dictionary link, you will go to a page where you can enter the noun you want to know about. Here is the Longman Dictionary's definition of furniture. You can see that furniture is an uncountable noun. And here is the definition of hair. You can see that when hair means the hair on your head, it is uncountable. And when it is referring to individual strands of hair, for example in a bowl of soup, then it is countable. This is an example of how important context is in determining if the noun is countable or uncountable. There are numerous nouns in English like hair with this dual grammatical countability. If you don't understand the concept of grammatical countability, then you can click to get an explanation and examples as shown here. Okay, let us suppose that the noun in its context is countable. Now you need to determine whether it is singular or plural. This should be easy enough in most cases. The next question has two alternative answers. One is that this is the first mention of the noun and the noun is not obvious, unique or specific in its context. The second is that the noun has already been mentioned or it is obvious, unique or specific. If you're not sure which answer applies, you can click I don't know for help in deciding. The yellow box has examples of what may be obvious, unique or specific in a context. If you click that you don't understand the question, then this is the explanation you can read. It explains what is meant by first mention and the terms obvious, unique and specific. Let's say in this case that you want to ask your son about your cat. It will be obvious to him that your question is about your cat and not about any other cat living on your street or elsewhere. So according to this recommendation in the green box to use the definite article, you ask, have you fed the cat? The recommendation to use the definite article is correct in the cat question. And the recommendation will be correct in most other similar cases if you have understood and answered the article picker questions correctly, as noted on this slide. This slide is a final way to conceive of the contexts or rules governing the use of the three different articles: indefinite, definite, and zero. Whole books have been written on this grammatical topic, so don't be surprised if you find exceptions to the basic rules presented in this lesson. In any case, it is important to know that mistakes in using the articles rarely cause the reader or listener to misunderstand you. So do not worry too much about getting the articles right, especially in everyday spoken language, unless you are preparing for a grammar test on the topic. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. Okay, we've come to the end of this introductory lesson on the English article system. Here's a list of the 6 basic rules. In the description below this video, you will find a link to the lesson index page shown on the left. As you can see, there are 4 ways to access the content, as well as a glossary and links to quizzes and more information on the topic.